Right bracket Chapter 10. American Freedom and Slavery. Nearly every nation has, sometime in its history, been involved in the practice of slavery. It has existed for thousands of years, mostly arising from captives taken by conquering armies. The variations in the practice of slavery have extended from the most rigorous tortures the human body and mind can tolerate to almost enviable positions of servitude. In some cases, the captives who were taken were even advanced in their standards of living and social progress. Among the Hebrews, the law of Moses provided that a slave taken from among foreigners should be liberated twice each 100 years during the year of the Jubilee. Lev. 25:10, but a criminal slave from among their own people should be set free after 6 years. Ex. 21:2. Greeks often purchased slaves from pirates. Romans were noted for capturing men for slaves, and either used them or sold them. Poor men sometimes sold their children into slavery, and often debtors were sold into slavery to satisfy their debts. In Europe, slavery gradually developed into serfdom by the 1300s, and during the 1400s the Portuguese in Africa bought up black slaves to sell in Europe. By the 1500s Spain gave their colonists and slave traders permission to take slaves into their Spanish colonies in America. While America was still under the rule of the British, the practice of slavery was employed, and in the 1770s, British ships were carrying about half the slaves to America. However, on January 1, 1808, the United States prohibited any further importation of slaves, but slavery itself did not end until after the Civil War. The experiences of young America were trying ones, and a tremendous struggle was required to overcome the shackles of ignorance and superstition. No one can point to the treatment received by the Negro, the Indian, or the Mormon people in America with any source of pride. They suffered the pains of prejudice, hatred and cruelty, equal to the barbarity of any savage or heathen nation. Yet these things happened in this free land of America. The Constitution of the United States was created for the express purpose of protecting civil rights, the right to choose, rather than to have the government do the choosing. Government has no right to force its citizens in what they must believe, what they can say, or how they should worship. If a foreign power or nation tried to force these things upon American citizens, it would be grounds for war. The Constitution cannot be construed as a lawful means of compelling anyone to violate the principles of their conscience. No government on earth has the rightful power to overthrow these freedoms and civil rights of the conscience. In more recent years, the Supreme Court, in the name of progress, has been gradually reversing their former decisions. Too often 4 of its members will vote on one side of an issue, and another 4 will vote the opposite, then the last member will carry the vote that overthrows our long-established laws. But laws, like truth, should ever remain consistent to the principle of freedom. Liberty is the ultimate design of good government. It is the only promise or hope of people who wish to speak, live, or worship according to their conscience. Any law that deprives a citizen of these rights is a step towards slavery. The laws of state government, federal government, or of the United Nations cannot abrogate the inalienable rights and freedoms of men, for freedom is a right given to man by his Creator. Whenever any government deprives individuals of their rights or freedom, then it is reverting back into the savage state from which it once emerged. Equality. When Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, he penned that all men are created equal, after which he followed with the words they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Liberty and equality were essentially the same factor for happiness, for if men are not free, they are not equal. By the same criteria, if men are forced to be equal, they are not free. The original wording of this theme was first found in the Virginia Declaration of Rights. Later, it was incorporated into many of the state constitutions, and Lincoln copied it into his Gettysburg Address. However, as Parley P. Pratt commented, it is a fact that all beings are not equal in their intellectual capacity, in their dispositions, and in the gifts and callings of God. It is a fact that some beings are more intelligent than others, and some are endowed with abilities or gifts which others do not possess. In organizing and peopling the worlds, it was found necessary to place among the inhabitants some superior intelligences, who were capacitated to teach, to rule, and preside among other intelligences. In short, a variety of gifts and adaptations to the different arts, sciences, and occupations was as necessary as the uses and benefits arising therefrom have proved to be. JD 1:257. There is no such thing as equality among individuals, races, or nations, except as it pertains to justice, liberty, the right to life, and the pursuit of happiness. There should be equality in the administration of law among people regardless of their race, color, creed, national origin or social status. All people who are brought before the courts should receive the same treatment without prejudice or favoritism. The equality or amalgamation of all people into one race, one social, religious or ideological standard is insane. Yet, this is a principal objective of some of the socialist internationalists. God has given every race and every people various gifts, talents and responsibilities whereby everyone can benefit. So it is with individuals. Not everyone can perform the same kind of work and assume the same responsibilities because they do not possess the same talents, knowledge or gifts. It is only by recognizing and contributing towards these differences that will develop growth and peace among the nations. The best charter in the world, dedicated to the principle of liberty, was established in the Constitution of the United States. Its preamble states that its purpose is to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. There is no mention of any other type of equality. In examining the constitutions of all other countries of the world, one will find there are only 4 which contain the concept of an economic or social equality. These are 1. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, 2. Mongol People's Republic, 3. Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, and 4. Guatemala. These nations, which proclaim social and economic equality, are the nations which practice the worst forms of slavery over the minds and bodies of men that has ever existed. The American Constitution does not guarantee that every man shall be equal in wealth, yet this is the object of those today who proclaim equality for their socialist ideals. Neither does the Constitution guarantee that every man shall be happy, but rather that he is free to choose whatever pursuit may bring him happiness. The equality of wealth, or personal association, must be agreed to by both parties. Legal fiat, which constantly changes, is not the answer to achieving such equality. The loss of freedom is the crux of these problems. Freedom is the gauge by which every law must be measured. Communists, Marxists and intellectual socialists have all decreed to bring about social equality, racial equality and economic equality by force and by law. But men without freedom can never be happy, nor can such a system ever prove successful. It is a criminal act to force people into social equality when they are not equal in their character. As one distinguished scholar said, "Personally, I feel only affection for the Negro, but there are facts that have to be faced. Any man with 2 eyes in his head can observe a Negro settlement in the Congo, can study the pure-blooded African in his native habitat as he exists when left on his own resources, can compare this settlement with London or Paris, and can draw his own conclusions regarding relative levels of character and intelligence or that combination of character and intelligence which is civilization. Finally, he can inquire as to the number of pure-blooded blacks who have made contributions to great literature or engineering or medicine or philosophy or abstract science. I do not include singing or athletics, as these are not primarily matters of character and intelligence. Nor is there any validity to the argument that the Negro hasn't been given a chance. The progress which the pure-blooded black has made when left to himself, with a minimum of white help or hindrance, genetically or otherwise, can be measured today in the Congo." Race and Reason, by Carlton Putnam, page 7. Then again Mr. Putnam added, "In China, India, Mesopotamia and on the Mediterranean coasts and islands, men isolated almost completely from one another, during some 5,000 years independently developed writing and metal tools, invented compasses, built temples and bridges, formulated philosophies, wrote books and poems. Why, then, did similar progress not occur in Africa?" Race and Reason, by Carlton Putnam, page 24. These characteristics among nations and races have been noted by many scholars and writers. Another author makes this notation. History says that the white and non-Negro colored races, Chinese and Indians, for example, developed languages, formed intricate systems of writing, kept records, discovered mathematics and other scientific principles, built cities and civilizations, created monuments to their achievements, and through their inventive genius, largely mastered the forces of land, sea and air. History also says that the Negro as a race did none of these things. The few systems of writing in use by Negro natives in Africa have been devised by white missionaries. Nearly all Negroes in their native sphere, untouched and uninfluenced by the whites, are a simple and childlike race, without literature, history, science or art. Segregation. Sin or Sensible. By W. Clyde Daniel, page 9. Arnold Toynbee, the noted historian, made the following observation. It will be seen that when we classify mankind by color, the only one of the primary races given by this classification which has not made a creative contribution to any one of our 21 civilizations is the black race. Race and Reason, Putnam, page 52. Thus, the term superiority of race need not raise the hackles of violent disagreement, for it simply means that superior talents were given to certain people to enable them to bear a greater burden of responsibility and duty, because where much is given, much is required. Jesus explained these differences among men in his parables of the 10 talents, fishes in the net, etc. However, intellect is not the only criteria by which we may judge human beings, for some of the worst criminals in history have been some of the most intelligent. Conversely, we all have friends who are not keen intellectually, but we could trust them with our possessions or our lives. Lincoln and slavery. The American Negro looked upon Abraham Lincoln as a savior for their deliverance, yet he understood these differences between the white and black races, and had this to say: I am not, nor ever have been in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. I am not, nor ever have been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor qualifying them to hold office. I will say in addition to this that there is a physical difference between the white and black races, which I believe will ever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. And inasmuch as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be the position of having the superior position assigned to the white race. Race and Reason, Putnam, page 8-9. Many people do not know that President Lincoln actually took steps to promote a separation between the two races, even offering public money for their colonization in other countries. President Lincoln once addressed a group of colored men on this very subject. This interview took place on July 14, 1862. The news item from the New York Daily Tribune, August 15, 1862, is as follows. This afternoon the President of the United States gave audience to a committee of colored men at the White House. Why, he asked, should the people of your race be colonized, and where? Why should they leave this country? This is, perhaps, the first question for proper consideration. You and we are different races. We have between us a broader differ-ends than exists between almost any other two races. Whether it is right or wrong I need not discuss, but this physical difference is a great disadvantage to us both, as I think your race suffers very greatly, many of them by living among us, while ours suffers from your presence. In a word, we suffer on each side. If this is admitted, it affords a reason at least why we should be separated. For the sake of your race you should sacrifice something of your present comfort for the purpose of being as grand in that respect as the white people. It is a cheering thought throughout life that something can be done to ameliorate the condition of those who have been subject to the hard usage of the world. It is difficult to make a man miserable while he feels he is worthy of himself, and claims kindred to the great God who made him. In the American Revolutionary War sacrifices were made by men engaged in it, but they were cheered by the future. General Washington himself endured greater physical hardships than if he had remained a British subject. Yet he was a happy man, because he was engaged in benefiting his race something for the children of his neighbors, having none of his own. The colony of Liberia has been in existence a long time. In a certain sense it is a success. They are not all American colonists or their descendants. Something less than 12,000 have been sent thither from this country. The place I am thinking about having for a colony is in Central America. It is nearer to us than Liberia, not much more than 1/4 as far as Liberia, and within 7 days' run by steamers. If such persons have what will be an advantage to them, the question is whether it cannot be made of advantage to you. You are intelligent, and know that success does not as much depend on external help as on self-reliance. Much, therefore, depends upon yourselves. I shall, if I get a sufficient number of you engaged, have provisions made that you shall not be wronged. If you will engage in the enterprise, I will spend some of the money interested to me. Am not sure you will succeed. The government may lose the money, but we cannot succeed unless we try, but we think, with care, we can succeed. I want you to let me know whether this can be done or not. This is the practical part of my wish to see you. These are subjects of very great importance, worthy of a month's study of a speech delivered in an hour. I ask you, then, to consider seriously, not pertaining to yourselves merely, nor for your race, and ours, for the present time, but as one of the things, if successfully managed, for the good of mankind not confined to the present generation. Lincoln knew by foresight and practical experience the differences of races and the troubles that usually came about as a result of those differences. He could see the need for separation or segregation as the best solution, yet he was determined that equal rights and freedom be enjoyed by all. In one part of his reference to South America he said, "I would endeavor to have you made equals, and have the best assurance that you should be the equals of the best." Hence, the wisest men among religious or political affairs assert that equal rights and segregation are the best answers to the race problems. Segregation or integration. Segregation and integration have been heated issues ever since the days of this speech by Lincoln, and the problems that have arisen are still generating friction and disagreement. Integration must inevitably go beyond mere associations, it leads to interracial marriage. Thus, the final objective of the integrationist is to accomplish the mixture of the races. The leading Negro weekly advanced this objective. Every community worth its salt should have a frankly interracial club or association where the boys and gals, colored and white, could associate, drink and dance. Of course, we favor racial right bracket mixing, including marriage, and are working openly to kill all racially restrictive legislation and social segregation and discrimination. Pittsburgh Courier, August 15, 1959. From an interview with Congressman Adam Clayton Powell came the following. 1. What is the argument that is used by Negro leaders in answer to the point that is sometimes made, that, if intermarriages continue in the next 25 to 30 years, then the races will be adulterated somewhat as they are in Cuba and Brazil? 2. I have heard that argument, but it doesn't amount to any argument at all from my standpoint, because if we are fighting for integration, well then there it is. I mean, you can't fight against segregation and want separation. We must be consistent. 3. I'm not sure that that is clear. 4. The Negro leaders are fighting against segregation. Therefore, they can't have a position on the one hand against segregation and on the other hand against interracial marriage. U.S. News and World Report, September 5, 1952. There is no reason to penalize a people or a locality who do not choose to mix with others. Segregation is just as much their right to defend as integration is by other people. Equality has had a more shrouded and evasive meaning to it than any other modern fabrication. Too often we hear the phrase equal before God, but there is no such scripture in the Bible. Status before God is earned by righteousness, and religiously men are just as varied, if not more so, than in any other factor. There is no such things as equality between two leaves of a tree, nor among snowflakes, nor between fingerprints of men. Yet these differences exist not right bracket as a mark of inferiority and superiority, but rather it is a matter of distinction. The difference between races is heredity, and that difference is a distinction established by the Creator. All men are created equal before the law. Hence, a man regardless of his color, race, national origin, or political preference, is not to be granted favoritism or prejudice before the court. If a man is condemned for a crime, his penalty should be the same as any other man, regardless of any of these differences. Thus, by reason alone, it can be recognized that the best solution to the problems between whites and blacks are best resolved by each voluntarily agreeing to segregation through pride in their own race and in the freedom of their own choice. Men may force the blacks into schools of the whites, or whites into schools of the blacks, but you cannot force one into the hearts and feelings of the other. For these reasons, God has established certain commandments and decrees for the principles of segregation. It was God who gave the Negro the color of his skin, and certainly God knew the trouble that would arise from integration of the races. If he had designed an amalgamation of races, then he would have made no barrier of color. But the scriptures clearly establish the reasons why God has made these distinctions. With the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ, these reasons became even more evident.